911, what's your emergency?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Franco and I am an emergency physician, and I'm actually working in emergency department of Prato, Tuscany, Italy. Finally, I just want to thank Professor Ricevuti for this lecture, and I apologize if I'm unable to be comprehensive due to the time constraints and the huge other topic. First of all, let's start with the definition of shock. As we know, shock is a life-threatening condition resulting from inadequate tissue perfusion and circulatory failure, typically identified with hypertension. The lack of sufficient oxygen delivery leads to cellular death and organ dysfunction. Early intervention is crucial as a delay in diagnosis or treatment can cause irreversible damage like multi-organ failure and even death. This condition is marked by a reduced oxygen delivery and an increased oxygen consumption, leading to cellular hypoxia. It could represent the end stage of multiple underlying causes as well, and can be fatal without a prompt management. So the key point is early recognition and timely treatment of shock are essential to prevent irreversible damage. It's surprising to see how the word shock is an acronym itself from what happens from a pathophysiological perspective. S stands for severe, H for hypoperfusion, O for organ, C for circulation, and K for crisis. In managing shock, determining the category and the underlying cause is crucial for guiding therapy. It's essential to evaluate, think, and act simultaneously. Time is critical. Hemodynamic stabilization must be initiated by emergency physician immediately, even before fully identifying the cause, because time is tissue. The most frequent cause of shock in older patients include septic shock, most common, often caused by infections like pneumonia or UTIs. Cardiogenic shock frequently results from myocardial infarction, CHF, or arrhythmias. Hypovolemic shock, typically due to dehydration or gastrointestinal bleeding. Obstructive shock can occur from conditions like pulmonary embolism. Distributive shock, less common, includes causes like anaphylaxis. So, early recognition and intervention are key to improving outcomes in shock patients. It's important also to highlight another pathogenic condition in the elderly. I'm referring to pharmacological shock. In older adults, it's crucial to consider pharmacological shock when assessing an undifferentiated shock. This can result from vasodilation or myocardial depression due to medications such as benzodiazepines, beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, opiates, anticholinergics, nitrates, and sildenafil. Sometimes shock syndromes can overlap, making it essential to identify and manage the medication-related causes. Septic shock represents 33% of the causes. Older adults are particularly vulnerable to their increased susceptibility to infections. Administer broad-spectrum antibiotics early, even when subtle signs like mild confusion or decreased appetite. Cardiogenic shock. This type is more prevalent in older adults due to a higher incidence of ischemic heart disease. Utilize POCUS or bedside ECG early to evaluate for myocardial infarction or heart failure. Hypovolemic shock often arises from gastrointestinal bleeding, dehydration, or trauma. Always consider the possibility of acute bleeding in cases of trauma falls, even if external signs are minimal. Early recognition and tailored intervention are essential for improving outcomes in this vulnerable population. Managing shock in older adults presents significant challenges due to atypical presentation and blunted physiological responses. Classic signs like tachycardia may be absent due to the medications like beta blockers, while reduced vasoconstrictions and decreased ability to compensate for hypertension complicate recognition. Comorbidities such as heart failure and diabetes along with polypharmacy further obscure diagnosis and treatment. Renal function declines with age, as is seen in reduced GFR, and altered immune response will also affect recovery, making timely and accurate intervention more difficult. Initial assessment should be focused on early detection. So let's take a brief look to the initial assessment right now. In adults, watch for subtle signs like syncope, hypertension may be a light sign, so compare with baseline BP. Don't have confidence only on vital supplementation and skin perfusion early. Use geriatric-specific tools such as frailty scales and cognitive assessments, and regularly reassess vitals, especially focusing on mental status or as rapid deterioration is common. The most frequent symptoms of shock in older adults include confusion or altered mental state. Older adults may show confusion, agitation, or decreased level of consciousness. Rapid shallow breathing. They may breathe quickly and with shallow breaths. Weak rapid pulse. The heart rate often becomes fast but weak. Cold clammy skin. The skin may feel cool and damp to the touch. Pale or bluish skin. A lack of oxygen may cause the skin to appear pale or develop a bluish tint, especially in extremities. Low blood pressure. Blood pressure may drop, especially in the late stages of shock. Decreased urine output. Reduced kidney function may lead to less urine production. Dizziness and fainting due to poor circulation and low blood pressure. In older adults, shock can develop more quickly and may be harder to recognize due to a pre-existing health condition, so rapid medical intervention is crucial. And again, vital signs. Normal readings can be misleading and do not rule out shock. Laboratory tests essentials but may not provide a complete picture. Imaging bedside US is valuable for assessing cardiac and volume status. Comorbid condition can mask or mimic shock symptoms, complicating diagnosis. And now, let's consider some clinical tips for early recognition. Keep an ICE index of suspicion. Always assess for shock in any case of acute deterioration. Frequent monitoring. Regularly check vital signs, mental status, urine output, SOFA score, etc. Use bedside ultrasound. Quickly evaluate cardiac function and fluid status. Assess skin and peripheral perfusion. Monitor capillary refill and look for modeling to detect perfusion issues early, and shock index as well. Let's consider labs right now. Lactate. Elevated levels indicate tissue hypoxia and severity of shock. CBC and differentiation helps to identify infections, anemia, or other blood-related issues. Renal and liver function test. Assess organ dysfunction caused by shock. Extended electrolytes. Monitor for electrolyte imbalances resulting from shock. Coagulation profile. Detects blood clotting abnormalities associated with severe shock. ABG evaluates acid bed balance and oxygenation status. Troponin Elevated levels suggest acute myocardial infarction in suspected patients. D-dimer, a value below the age-adjusted cutoff in patients with low to intermediate pre-test probability, can rule out pulmonary embolism. BNP, levels less than 100 pgml or less than 300 pgml indicate that acute heart failure is unlikely. Mandatory imaging in acute settings. ECG is vital for detecting arrhythmias, ischemia, or signs specific to syndrome. Chest X-ray can uncover conditions such as pneumonia or cardiogenic edema, indicating potential left ventricular failure. CT imaging is tailored to clinical contexts such as CT angio for evaluating pulmonary embolism, CT abdomen pelvis to rule out septic sources in abdomen, CT angio or abdomen to check for internal hemorrhage. Each imaging modality serves to guide rapid diagnosis and treatment decisions based on clinical scenario. Let's consider now fluid resuscitation. It's such a delicate balance. Older adults are at higher risk of fluid overload due to reduced cardiac renal reserves. It's convenient to start with smaller fluid boluses and reassess frequently. Check and monitor for pulmonary edema, signs like rales, increased oxygen needs. For this reason, use POCUS to assess lung congestion and IVC diameter variability. In this context, we don't discuss about PRBC's treatment that appear to be specific, especially treating patients for massive hemorrhage. Anyway, the newest guidelines suggest start with small bolus 250 to 500 milliliter increments. Use balanced crystalloids. Prefer lactate ringers over normal saline. Monitor of fluid overload. Check for crinkles and assess jugular venous pressure or IVC diameter excursions. Adjust based on response, reassess after each bolus. Vasopressor use. It's very interesting. Today, the most recent guidelines recommend an early initiation begin if hypertension persists after a fluid challenge. First line agent, norepinephrine, is the first line drug. So start vasopressor if blood pressure remains low after adequate fluid resuscitation, as we said before. Norepinephrine, as we said, first line for septic shock. This is the dosage. Dobutamine, using cardiogenic shock if cardiac output is very low. Titrate slowly and check closely for arrhythmias and myocardial ischemia, as older adults are more sensitive to vasopressors. Let's introduce the therapeutical behavior of emergency physician in septic shock. Administer antibiotics within 1 hour. The early administration of antibiotics within the first hour of recognizing septic shock is critical for improving patient outcomes. Delays in treatment are associated with higher mortality rates, making timely intervention essential. Empiric broad-spectrum coverage. Initial antibiotic therapy should be broad-spectrum and empirically selected, targeting the most likely pathogens based on the suspected sources of infection. Example, respiratory, urinary, or abdominal infection. This ensures immediate coverage while awaiting culture results. Adjust for renal function. Renal function must be closely monitored in patients with septic shock, as the kidneys are often affected, and antibiotic doses should be adjusted according to the patient's GFR to avoid toxicity or underdosing, ensuring both efficacy and safety. De-escalate when possible. Once culture and sensitivity results are available, therapy should be de-escalated to more targeted antibiotics. Narrowing the antibiotic spectrum reduces the risk of resistance, minimizes side effects, and preserves gut flora. Early and appropriate antibiotics management is a cornerstone of treating septic shock, significantly impacting patient survival and recovery. The slide shows antibiotics for empiric regimen used in ACEP. And here is a panel of antibiotics mostly used according to the suspected source of infection. Cardiogenic shock treatment. Utilize appropriate devices for oxygen delivery with high-flow oxygen or ventilation support. Treat arrhythmias and consider dobutamine to improve cardiac output. Involve a cardiologist early for potential interventions such as PCI, CABG, or other supports, and remember to avoid fluid overload. And now, some general consideration based on therapy. It's mandatory adjust dosages for renal function, especially in older adults, by considering GFR and reviewing medication that may be cause of hypertension. Be mindful of polypharmacy and potential drug interactions in shock management. It's convenient to consult a pharmacist or geriatric specialist for complex medication regimens. Key tips and tricks recap. First of all, early identification. Look for subtle changes like other mental status, not just classic signs. Fluid resuscitation. Use smaller boluses. Reassess frequently to avoid overload. Use POCUS that is essential for assessing fluid responsiveness and cardiac function. Use vasopressors. Early introduction in therapy. Titrate slowly, especially in older adults. Watch for comorbidities. Think always to underlying illness and medication interaction in your treatment plan. Consideration for ICU admission. Discuss goal of care with the intensivist, colleagues, with the patient and the family. Finally, discuss on the role of palliative care in elderly with poor prognosis. Thanks for your attention.